Welcome to Celestial Zodiac. Today we're breaking down Venus retrograde by zodiac sign. How this deeply reflective retrograde shows up differently depending on where Venus is traveling through the zodiac. Venus rules love, relationships, values, pleasure, money, and self-worth. It governs what we're drawn to, what we prioritize, and what we consider worthy of our time, energy, and affection. When Venus retrogrades, that energy doesn't disappear. It turns inward. Attraction becomes introspective, desires slow down, and old patterns around love, worth, and attachment resurface for review. The sign Venus retrogrades in matters because it determines how we experience love internally, not externally. This isn't about relationship outcomes or dramatic breakups. It's about emotional patterns, unconscious expectations, and the stories we tell ourselves about what we deserve. Venus retrograde asks us to reassess what we value rather than chase validation from the outside world. Venus rules how we relate, not just who we love. It governs how we receive affection, how we express appreciation, and how comfortable we are with intimacy and vulnerability. Venus is the part of us that seeks harmony, beauty, and connection, and it reveals where we compromise, attach, or withhold in order to feel loved. Venus also rules pleasure and satisfaction, but not in a superficial sense. It reflects emotional fulfillment, what actually nourishes us versus what merely distracts us. When Venus is healthy, relationships feel reciprocal and grounded in self-respect. When Venus is distorted or unexamined, patterns of overgiving, undervaluing, or seeking external approval emerge. On a material level, Venus governs money, resources, and personal value systems. It influences spending habits, financial self-worth, and how secure we feel receiving abundance. During a Venus retrograde, financial patterns often mirror emotional ones, revealing where worth has been tied to validation, stability, or fear of loss. Ultimately, Venus shows what we attract, what we tolerate, and what we believe we're worthy of receiving. During a Venus retrograde, these themes turn inward, asking us to reassess attachment instead of reinforcing it. When Venus retrogrades, attraction slows and reflection deepens. What once felt instinctive in love or pleasure begins to feel uncertain or emotionally complex. Relationships don't stop, but they stop running on autopilot. Patterns that were once tolerated without question suddenly feel heavier, louder, or emotionally revealing. Old relationships, memories, desires, and unresolved emotional dynamics often resurface, not necessarily to be rekindled but to be understood. Venus retrograde exposes emotional blind spots, especially where compromise replaced authenticity or validation replaced self-worth. During this period, pleasure itself changes. What once brought comfort may feel empty, while long-ignored emotional needs demand attention. This can create dissatisfaction, restlessness, or emotional withdrawal, not because something is wrong but because alignment is being questioned. Financially and emotionally, Venus retrograde highlights imbalance. Overspending, undercharging, emotional overgiving, or withholding affection often come under review. The retrograde reveals where value has been distorted by fear, habit, or outdated expectations. Ultimately, Venus retrograde isn't about losing love. It's about redefining it. When Venus stations direct, attraction returns with clarity, but only if values have been consciously recalibrated. Venus retrograde in Aries challenges independence within relationships. Attraction becomes impulsive yet uncertain, and desire may conflict with emotional vulnerability. Old patterns around dominance, pursuit, or self-focused attachment resurface. The life theme tested is autonomy versus connection. The lesson is learning that love doesn't require proving strength. Authenticity creates real attraction. Venus retrograde in Taurus destabilizes comfort and emotional security. Attachment to routines, possessions, or familiar relationships becomes emotionally charged. Desire slows and resistance to change intensifies. The life theme tested is self-worth and material security. The lesson is recognizing when comfort becomes stagnation, and when true value requires emotional flexibility. Venus retrograde in Gemini turns love into reflection and reevaluation. Attraction becomes mental, curious, yet indecisive. Old conversations, unanswered questions, and unresolved emotional dialogues resurface. The life theme tested is communication and emotional clarity. The lesson is learning that understanding isn't the same as connection, and clarity requires honesty, not constant explanation. Venus retrograde in Cancer intensifies emotional memory and attachment. Love becomes deeply tied to the past, family dynamics, and emotional safety. Vulnerability feels risky and protective instincts heighten. The life theme tested is emotional security and nurturing patterns. The lesson is learning when emotional protection turns into emotional avoidance. Venus retrograde in Leo challenges validation and romantic pride. Desire becomes self-conscious, especially when appreciation feels delayed or conditional. Wounds around being seen, valued, or chosen resurface. The life theme tested is self-worth and creative expression in love. The lesson is redefining love as something felt internally, not earned through recognition. Venus retrograde in Virgo turns love inward through analysis and self-criticism. Attraction becomes selective, cautious, and emotionally restrained. Old patterns of overgiving or self-judgment in relationships reappear. The life theme tested is service versus self-neglect. The lesson is learning that love doesn't need to be perfected to be real. Venus retrograde in Libra questions harmony and balance in relationships. Indecision intensifies as emotional truths conflict with the desire to keep peace. Old compromises and unspoken resentments surface. The life theme tested is fairness and mutuality. The lesson is recognizing that true balance requires honesty, not avoidance. Venus retrograde in Scorpio deepens emotional intensity and attachment. Desire becomes magnetic but heavy, pulling unresolved emotional bonds to the surface. Power struggles and trust issues resurface. The life theme tested is intimacy and emotional truth. The lesson is learning that vulnerability creates connection. Control does not. Venus retrograde in Sagittarius challenges belief systems around love and freedom. Attraction becomes restless, questioning long-term alignment. Emotional honesty conflicts with the desire for independence. The life theme tested is truth and commitment. The lesson is learning when freedom is growth, and when it's emotional avoidance. Venus retrograde in Capricorn slows emotional expression and tests commitment. Love feels serious, heavy, or burdened by responsibility. Old expectations around loyalty, effort, and worth resurface. The life theme tested is emotional responsibility and long-term value. The lesson is learning that love isn't earned through endurance alone. Venus retrograde in Aquarius disrupts emotional detachment and unconventional bonds. Desire becomes erratic, craving freedom while questioning emotional distance. Old patterns of detachment resurface. The life theme tested is individuality within connection. The lesson is learning that independence doesn't require emotional withdrawal. Venus retrograde in Pisces dissolves romantic illusions and emotional boundaries. Love becomes idealized yet confusing, blurring fantasy and reality. Old emotional wounds resurface through nostalgia or longing. The life theme tested is compassion and emotional boundaries. The lesson is learning that unconditional love still requires self-respect. Across all signs, Venus retrograde reveals one shared truth. Attraction follows self-worth. This retrograde isn't about losing love. It's about redefining what love actually means to you. Working with Venus retrograde means slowing down, observing emotional patterns, and reassessing what you truly value, not what you've been conditioned to desire. When Venus stations direct again, love returns with clarity, depth, and emotional integrity. Thank you for watching Celestial Zodiac. If you found this breakdown of Venus retrograde helpful, please like, subscribe, and share so more people can learn how to work with these cycles instead of fighting them. Your support helps keep this channel growing, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, take care and choose with intention.